Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
All right, welcome everyone to our panel, Denver Startup Week, Growth Mindset and Resilience of a Scale-Up CEO. My name is Brian Egan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Evolve. We're a vacation rental hospitality platform based here in Denver. I'm joined by some amazing panelists, Paige, Goss, Thad Eby, Scott Shatford, Ian MacGregor. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves in just a second. I wanna offer a quick thank you to Denver Startup Week, the organizing committee, and our hosts at the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network, aka Ben. We really appreciate all of you and all of the things that you've done for our ecosystem here in Denver and broader Colorado. I also want to mention a couple quick things. We're going to talk a lot, as you might have imagined from the title of the panel, about resilience. And certainly the last 18 months has tested the resilience of entrepreneurs and startups, growth companies in an unprecedented way, truly. But we also want to acknowledge that our companies, our leadership, our personal growth and development are just a very small subset of what's gone on the last 18 months. The pandemic, a reckoning on social justice in this country and this world, a number of other fraught contexts. And what we want to acknowledge is just that there's been a lot of impact on the world and certainly a lot of loss of life and things that are far more serious than what we're dealing with day to day within our companies. So with that said, I also want to turn to which is, this is not a doom and gloom panel. This is not us kind of going down just a path of here are all the hardships that we face, but rather the point being resilience and the ways in which these incredible leaders have persevered through some of the challenges that were thrown at them in the last 18 months in a variety of ways. And I can't wait to get after that. So without further ado, I want to let them introduce themselves. Paige, maybe you could get us started with a quick introduction.
Sure. Thanks so much, Brian. And thanks again, Denver Startup Week and Ben. It's a pleasure to be here with amazing other CEOs. So my name is Paige Goss. I'm the founder and CEO of Point Solutions Group. We are an information systems and data security consulting firm here based in Denver. We have operations currently in 9 different states and have grown tremendously over the last 4 years. So I'm looking forward to this panel and talking a lot about kind of what it takes to grow your organization.
Thank you, Paige. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'm Ian. I was born and raised here in Colorado. I have my undergrad from the Colorado School of Mines. It took me, I think, over a decade to finish. So a non-traditional path, I think, is the polite way to say it. So my business partner and I both came out of the world of pro cycling, and our business, Skratch Labs, was born kind of as a happy accident. And really what happened is, former teammates, former colleagues, they just kept asking for the stuff that we were using and making, ourselves to help ourselves at races. And, it was that demand, right, that it wouldn't go away that kind of forced us to start a business. Over the past 10 years, we've bootstrapped the business. We've now got over 7,000 retailers in the US that run the gamut from sort of amazing local bike and running stores to REI, Whole Foods, and Target nationally. We've got products that range from a food truck that we've had drive all over the country at events to cookbooks and, natural alternatives to sports nutrition.
Thank you, Ian. Scott.
Everybody, I'm Scott Shatford, founder CEO of AirDNA. We are a vacation rental data provider. And a little bit about my origin story. I started at Airbnb hosting out in California in 2012 and sort of realized there was a data opportunity at play. Worked out of my garage there for a year or so, and it was time to hire some people. Looked around the US for where to go next to sort of scale this business, and ended up landing in Denver, and it's been a super successful ride. So I can identify with a lot of folks that are sort of thinking about, is Denver the place and how we're going to scale it here? And it's been a terrific ride here, scaling the team to about 70 people based here in Denver and also in Barcelona.
Thanks, Scott. And we're glad that you decided to build AirDNA in Denver. By the way, quick note, California companies built in garages, Denver companies built in basements, typically. A quick way to sort of separate them out. Evolve being no exception to that. Thad, last but not least, certainly.
Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all the panelists. Really excited to be joining you. Very similar to Ian, I am also a Colorado native, grew up here in Colorado. Instead of going to the mines, I actually went to school in Michigan and spent some time in the Bay Area, as well as London, England, before deciding to come back to my home state and start Ombud. Ombud is a SaaS software company. We focus on solving the content problems used by sales teams. So think of all the gnarly processes around RFPs, statements of work, sales proposals. We find a way to automate that for organizations like Zendesk, Amerisource Bergen, as well as Marketo and Ping Identity, a local Denver company here. Brian, you're absolutely right. When I started Ombud, I actually used my basement as my first office. And then we opened up our office in downtown Boulder, right across from the Walnut Brewery, which unfortunately is no longer with us. Other than that, I'm really excited to be talking about this topic and more importantly, the growth mindset that goes with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Thad. Okay, let's get right after it. I think knowing this panel, we like to take a, kind of like jump into the deep end of the pool approach to probably our careers, and why not extend that here. So I think for our first question today, let's focus on the hard stuff. What was the hardest decision that you've had to make in the last 18 months? And if you, of course, could give us a little bit of context around that decision as well. Feel free to jump in, and the panelists already know this, but I will kind of moderate and call on somebody to get us started. Paige, I started with you last time, so we haven't heard from you in the longest. We'll go with you first.
I had a feeling that was coming. So I think the hardest decision that I made during the pandemic was really to double down on our business. And really what I mean from that was we had an opportunity that presented itself to go through an acquisition in 2020. And I think, as I think back about the process, looking at it, we started the conversation in February of 2020, obviously had no idea what was about to hit us right in the middle of the face. And we continued that. And so I think from my side, sticking to a plan and being really committed to what we were wanting to do and the opportunity that was in front of us, it took a lot longer than we had anticipated. It certainly changed courses 15 different times, I think, as we were trying to go through the process. But really, we knew that there was an opportunity for us to continue to grow and for us to put kind of the pedal to the metal there, if you will. And so we followed through on that. And a lot of people, I think, were really nervous, within the organization, outside of the organization, from financing to, individuals that we were going to be taking on with the acquisition. And so, there was a lot of nerves that went into that decision, but I think ultimately it was the right decision for our organization and ultimately has helped continue the path for growth that we wanted to stay on prior to 2020.
Thank you, Paige. It's a great story and a perfect example of what we were talking about around resilience and sort of the optimism and upside of a challenging environment. Who would like to jump in next?
I can jump in. As a CEO of a company in the travel sector, and Brian, you can appreciate this, in a pandemic, it was a particularly difficult place to be because not only were we, weren't people scared to travel, there was just a lot of uncertainty about how the government was going to allow people to travel, right? And so, while we have a lot of data, our data couldn't predict what was going to happen with shutdowns and regulations and freedom of movement. And so it was really difficult to figure out, how much was revenue going to drop off and when it was going to bounce back. So, we are a bootstrap company. We never raise capital. We don't have a ton of money on the balance sheet. So it always feels like we're riding on a bit of the razor's edge a little bit, right? And so, the conversation, obviously, early pandemic is that we're going to, cut salaries. We're going to cut folks and right size the business to where we think we're going to be in 6 months. And that was a lot of late nights. I'm sure, a lot of you guys were in that same position. We ended up cutting salaries pretty minimally, 15% to try to just sort of extend, what we had in the bank another few months, just with the uncertainty. But we were able to bounce that back about 3 months later as we sort of had, a stronger footing and sort of figured that there was a rebound. But that messaging, that positioning, when you're a high growth startup and everything's been good and rosy, to sort of pivot into, here's the reality, guys. Those conversations, it's a tough place to go to. So that was the real most difficult decision. We made a lot of good decisions along the way. That was definitely the toughest one to come to a conclusion and communicate to the team. But I think they really appreciated our honesty in that conversation instead of pretending it was all going to be okay. That's probably my hardest decision.
Yeah, well, first of all, as a fellow hospitality travel company and in the vacation rental space, I remember saying to several people that it felt like I was living in a satirical headline that travel bans were bad for the travel business. I certainly can empathize and relate, Scott. I also think that's maybe something we can come back to a bit when we talk about leadership is, the way in which communication, transparency, and the way in which you bring that to life in challenging times. It's always easy in good times, but that's when it gets tested. So maybe we'll come back to that topic. Thad, would love to hear from you on the hardest decision you made in the last 18 months and some of the context around it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And Brian, I mean, I'll definitely reiterate on kind of where Scott was. And there's a lot of uncertainty leading up. I mean, I think we closed our office, March 13th, right going into the St. Patrick's Day holiday. And at that point, I think nobody really knew, what was going to happen. The big thing that I think everybody was pushing on was this notion around PPP, right? The Paycheck Protection Program. And we early on said we were not going to do any layoffs at all. It was kind of like a key area. We actually looked at every employee and kind of looked at the business and said, this is something we're not going to go through. And my CFO, really said, we really do need to apply for this PPP action. It's something I think is really important for us. And when we got accepted into the program, we immediately realized, we're like, this is 3 years of funding that it took for Ombud to start its organization. And we ultimately looked at our balance sheet. We looked at where we were as an organization. We looked at our employees. And we said, look, we're gonna put our sail in the wind, and we're not going to accept PPP. And that was a huge decision that we actually walked away from, and we never looked back from it. But it was, a lot of like tiring nights of being able to make that grappling decision of, can we walk away from, what would normally have been a massive, windfall of cash to really keep the business afloat. And we really decided to kind of rise above that. That would probably be one of the biggest decisions that we went through in the last 18 months.
Yeah, certainly. And related with what Paige's story, it's, at some point when you get hit in the face with something like this, it's a survival instinct that can kick in. And, it's an interesting process of trying to unpack which elements of that are real and need to be, grappled with strategically, tactically, and which elements of that are just that, a fight or flight instinct that kicks in and perhaps isn't the long-term path. It's a great story. Thank you, Thad. Ian, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks, everyone. I think, the first thing that comes to mind for me is really the fear, that we felt. And, I think Thad, same, right? March 13th, I'll never forget that day and that weekend. And, for us, we were sort of on the forefront of a wave, right? Where we'd had massive growth and, we're really had our business lined up to keep up with that. And very quickly, as society was dealing with this unknown challenge that none of us had any context around, we saw some pretty strong signals of things going the other way very rapidly. And, many long nights with our CFO trying to model things out. And, we went from having a trajectory like this to a trajectory going the other way. And, we had to make some decisions about what to do about it. And I think, it's important to acknowledge that, like, we look back in hindsight and it seems like a smart decision. I think in some ways it's probably a lucky decision, but, the thing that we committed to was to say, look, we're not going to lay anybody off. And when we were talking with, our people and hearing their stories and what was going on in their lives, the worry and the fear was very real. And I think a lot of people felt out of control. And the only thing that we could control was how much cash we did have. And I remember standing up in front of the company and saying, literally, this is what it is. This is what we've got. This is what the burn rate is. And I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody here knows what's going to happen, but we're going to do it together. And again, in hindsight, that seems really smart. I think it was, we were lucky that it went the other way. We were lucky that our industry, got a tailwind during this time period. But it was nice because I think it not only gave, myself, but all of us together kind of that psychological safety that allowed people to step back and lean in and think creatively and sort of get out of their, survival mode thinking, which I think really helped the business thrive.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Ian. It's amazing listening to these stories. I mean, almost each of them could be a panel discussion in and of itself. One of which is just exploring luck and the fact that sometimes the ball's got to bounce your way to play this sport for a long time and do so successfully. But there's also, I believe, something to the art of putting yourself in the way of luck. And I don't think it's as random as maybe just a spin of the roulette wheel. So, okay, great. Thank you all. That was the downside, the hardest thing. Let's shift over to our more, we were talking before the panel started about generally, and I try to stay away from generalisms, but a lot of entrepreneurs can be described as this sort of optimistic realist or a realist optimist, as it were, where it's an intellectually honest approach to what needs to happen, but a fundamental belief that things can get better tomorrow. So I was curious about what shift, and this could be strategically, it could be tactically within the operation of the business, but what shift that did you make in the last 18 months that you think is going to have the longest lasting positive impact on your business and potentially a permanent one? Paige, I guess it's now tradition that we start with you because we haven't heard from you in a little while, so we'll go back to you.
I don't know if I like this or not, Brian.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's a really good question, and I think everybody here on the panel so far has talked about people, right? And I think what the last 18 months, not only the pandemic, but a lot of the other systemic things that our organization and country are dealing with right now have really brought to light is the focus on people and the importance of team and really working together to bring the organization closer, regardless of physical location, right? I think it taught us that a lot of organizations are going to continue to be spread out, remote. And for us, the biggest change that we made it's here to stay, right, is one, we opened up some flexibility. I think all of us have talked about that on some level, right? We kind of have a you do what's best for you approach. If that means coming into the office, like myself, I've got 4-year-old twins, so being at home was a disaster. But some of my team, they're 10 times more productive from home. So I think we took that approach and then really looked at our organization structure and putting in consistent feedback loops, consistent communication paths, different lead channels from leads that had not traditionally been leads, had been individual contributors. And so, we were super intentional around how often we were talking to our teams, and that we weren't just talking about delivering products or services to our customers. We were talking about humans and what was going on in their life and what they needed and how we could be there to support them as they were going through this as much as we wanted them to be there to support our clients and our organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paige. And maybe 2 quick shout outs that just came to mind. One is for all the working parents out there, and particularly those with younger kids. I have twins as well. They're 15. They can handle themselves. But for all the parents out there that were brought into an environment where suddenly the office and school were all in one place, that's a particular challenge. And just want to shout them out for all the hard work at all of our companies and beyond in the last 18 months. The other one, by the way, it came up like 3 times. I meant to say this. Maybe a quick acknowledgement of the CFOs out there. Not an easy job to be playing over the last 18 months. I think we've probably all doubled up on the amount of time that we've spent with our financial planning and analysis groups, and deeply appreciate all of that effort as well. Who would like to jump in next on the same idea, again, a positive and hopefully long-lasting impact that's come from a shift in strategy or tactics?
Yeah, I'm happy to go, Brian. I definitely would agree with exactly what Paige said. So there's the obvious, right? We've shifted completely our work environment and how we go about supporting our employees, right? I mean, I think it goes without saying. And even to this point, we had a very strong in-office culture prior to the pandemic. I mean, it was kind of what a lot of people, including myself, would look forward to every day, having that periodization that would come with being in the office. And we had to move away from that. And I think one of the biggest areas is being able to focus on how do we communicate to a point of being able to kind of simulate that level of in-office collaboration and communication. I think the other thing is also knowing how to celebrate, right? Being able to celebrate our wins together in that remote area. And we've gone down, very specific tactics, being able to kind of work directly with our employees. I think the other thing, though, that we really looked at was the investment we make in our employees. So we when the pandemic came around, we reevaluated our benefits program and specifically carved out, a mental health program for our employees. So I believe they get, 4 or 5 sessions a month that's completely paid for by the company for each employee to be able to take advantage of, their ability to have somebody to talk to above and beyond. That was a big shift for us. And then finally, more on a strategic side, we started to look at our product and, more importantly, how we interact with our users day to day. And there's a mundane mutiny that kind of comes with this, right? Like you've got this ongoing activity. And so how do we make that more of a simulated experience that breaks in, things like opportunities to have little mental checks for our users and being able to create. So it's really all about that user experience and making sure that you're kind of re-embracing the experience of the users based on this new normal that we now face and how we work together.
Yeah, thank you, Thad. I've only known you for like 10 years.
Time, Brad.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, Ryan, nice to meet you. So, amazing point, and something that, time permitting, we do want to work back to as well on how cultures, operations, workforces have evolved in this period as well. So thanks for touching on that too. Ian or Scott?
We can jump into some sort of more like strategic, tactical things that we thought about coming out of the recovery. As a data provider, there's lots of ways to spin data, right? We sell data to individual Airbnb hosts all the way to hedge funds and hotels. So a lot of us, a lot of our thought was, strategically, what's going to bounce back first? Who's going to lead that innovation? And where do we want to be positioning ourselves as a company, as we know there's lots of unemployed, smart people at home putting on their entrepreneurial hats, trying to figure out how they're going to dig themselves out of this hole, right? And so a lot of our tactical strategies went into building those tools to really motivate, inspire, educate those people, that we're trying to figure out, they've got a credit card and they can go run an apartment and they can go make some money on Airbnb, or they can go buy their first little home or yurt and throw it in their backyard and try to make a few extra bucks. And so, it was really a product strategy for us, saying, how do we make it affordable, usable, understandable to sort of somebody who's never done this before? And so for a lot of our thought was around how do we position ourselves, our product, our data around where we thought this innovation and where the rebound would happen first too, which was a lot of bored smart people at home trying to figure out how to get out of the house and make a buck, more flexibly than they were previously.
Yeah, enabling other people's resilience, right? And everyone. I mean, it's amazing. Again, as I said in the sort of proviso here, this isn't just about us. I think it's an interesting microcosm of what has been a story of resilience, broadly speaking. Thanks for sharing that, Scott. Ian, would love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, definitely. I think got a little bit of a different lens here, right? I think for our business, we're consumer focused, and recognizing that for consumers, their worlds just changed completely, right? For all the reasons that we're talking about all today and have all experienced. And I think in that, what we found was some real opportunities to to try and support what for many people was hopefully the best part of their day, right? When they were able to get out for a hike or a run or a bike ride or whatever it might be, and suddenly people were finding themselves with new flexibility to do so. And I think for us, that was a mindset and an adjustment that we were able to sort of lean into, and I hope provide some real support to our customers, to folks during that period. So relatively simple, but a lens with which to look through things differently.
Simple but powerful, and simple often is, right? Simple's not synonymous with easy, and it's funny that you say that. I hadn't stepped back and viewed it through that lens. Thank you. I don't know about you all, but for me, the moment where I remember to get outside every day is usually, one of the best parts, certainly the most important part of the day. And Ian, given the bike supply chain in the world over the last 2 years, I'm hoping that with all those new bikes came plenty of need for Skratch Labs products. So.
Yeah.
Maybe you all were just talking about this, and so maybe we'll move to this topic about workforces, cultures, how you go about the business of your business as a team. And I'm really interested. I mean, rather than maybe doing sort of more of the round robin, we'll come back to that in a second, but I'd also love to give you all a chance to react to what you're hearing from other people, from your peers here on the panel. So I don't know, Paige, maybe we'll break with tradition, but if you'd like to go first, you're welcome to, but anyone's welcome to jump in. Go with that where you'd like, but I'm interested to hear, obviously, Thad hit on the shift to, out of the office. Maybe maybe with a future lens here, again, like how do you think that these changes, some of the things that we all had to shift to remote, we all had to go Zoom only, as we come out of that, how are you thinking about this, and what sort of lasting impacts on your cultures do you think the last 18 months has brought?
I'll jump in, Brian. I think the first thing, at least that I think about, is that there's an amazing range of differences amongst people, and that we don't have to try and be everything to everyone, but that what we need to do is to clearly define what we're going to be, and then be, to stick with it, be congruent with those expectations, so that people can find the team, right, that they fit with. And I think for us, what we're looking towards and looking for is that it's not going to be a fully remote environment, but it's also definitely not going to be a 9-to-5 office world. And that, this has really poured a lot of fuel on the fire of what we experimented with over the last few years. And what we found that works, again, just for us and for our team, is kind of, we bring people together on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and that does create and foster some of those human in-person connections that are necessary, and then give individual teams and departments the freedom to figure out the best way to do the jobs they have to do, and then to really lean on a trust of everybody, right? That don't care, if you've got a sick kid. Well, I do care about that, but I don't care if you have to take your kid to the doctor. We don't care, if you've got lawn work you want to do. Like, none of that matters. What we care about is that you're engaged and that you get your work done, and we're going to trust you to do it. And again, that works for us. I fully respect and understand that other people are looking for different solutions.
Any adds or reactions to that?
Yeah, Ian, I think you and I actually talked about this yesterday at breakfast, right? We had most of our team had traditionally been in the office all day, every day. We do some federal work, and so they're traditionally in kind of shifts, right? So I think for us, we still have a mass majority of individuals in office. But what has been really interesting for me has been sort of the shift from that traditional thinking with new employees that we're bringing into the organization. So they're asking things like, where do I submit time for my doctor's appointment? Or do I have to give you an update that I'm going to go pick up my sick kid, or that I've got something to do on Friday afternoon? And when my response is, no, I actually don't want you to tell me, that's very foreign to a lot of individuals that have come from larger, more traditional, more structured environments. And so I think working with our teams to understand that, we trust them and we believe in them, and we're encouraging them to do what they need to do regardless of where or under what time frame, right? Yes, there's certain expectations of meetings and when we need to be present, and we too have sort of a 2 to 3 day where we encourage everyone to come into an office. But I want you to get the work done. But what that also has done for us has built a lot of our expectations up, right? And a lot of how we're verifying and working with our teams to ensure that the job is getting done. So there's certainly been an eye-opening experience, but also a kind of coming back to what are the expectations and how are we ensuring that those are met.
Thanks, Paige.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
No, here you go.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm positive.
All right, man. So I'll kind of iterate on a couple of things. So 100% agree with exactly where Ian's at, right? It's the trust but verify when it comes to people. Paige, to your point, being able to kind of rethink collaboration. So what we did is we ended up ending our lease. We were in a skyscraper actually right across the street from Brian's office. And we ended up getting our own little building. And the thing that we really prioritized was an outdoor courtyard that is almost like a little Japanese Zen garden. And for us, it was all about, let's get a grill. Let's treat that as more of like a community, like, almost like a team picnic type area that we could take advantage of. And really kind of, having certain departments or teams come in on a day-to-day basis. It's actually really opened up quite a bit. It doesn't even really feel like an office, but more of it's more of a community for us to be able to hang out, get to know each other, and more importantly, focus on things that matter. We still have the group Zoom sessions, and we're still, figuring out how to have the, in person, but with remote locations. But I think, our new way of work and being able to kind of reapply, I think has been really helpful. And I think a lot of people really do enjoy the ability to, have a Friday where they're not in the office or a Monday where they're not in the office. It's worked out really well. I do think, though, over time, and this is just more of a prediction, that people will require more periodization. There's a study released last week that literally went into the fact that when people kind of start their day and end their day in front of a machine, they don't really have any of those spikes of unpredictability. And we as humans actually kind of do enjoy that. To your point, getting out of the office, Brian, and having that external environment, it really does create a level of unpredictability that actually keeps people going. So, any way that we can support and foster that, we want to invest and make sure that we're doing it the right way. And we felt that it was kind of reimagine and reinvent our office structure and our office environment, which hopefully will be here to stay for a while.
Thanks for that.
That you guys said, you guys said it pretty well, right? I think that trust component is tricky, right? It's like, I got to trust you and you have to trust me, and we have to sort of figure out how to communicate in a new way that we didn't do before. We were a really flat organization. And so we moved to Zoom calls. It was like, 27 people on every call. And I was like, well, this isn't really going to work. This is not how we worked before. It was more, in the bullpen, everybody's sort of poking each other on the back and say, hey, where's that? Where's this? And like, how to put that on the Zoom was a real struggle for us, right? And I think, for CEOs, structure and rigidity is great for us, right? So we know exactly where everything is and what the process is and how to operationalize anything and how to build our org chart that way. But it's not the best for employees. And I think we've learned that, some employees love the collaboration, they're cross-functional, they love to be learning and growing by understanding what marketing's doing, even if they're a data engineer, right? And that's the sort of the thing that I'm trying to inspire is like, if you want to come in and be an all-star and progress and not just be in your little silo, the office is going to be the best environment for you to understand our business, to understand our customer, to understand all the different functions. That's going to happen here. It's not going to happen on the quarterly all hands call. So just trying to motivate people, like, let's not just be in our little product problem. Let's like really try to understand it at a higher level. And that's always going to happen in the office, that innovation, that sort of brainstorming, that, that's going to happen in the office. And so I do feel in the pandemic, people were working really hard, right? People had nowhere to go, nothing to do, and were worried about their jobs. And every month we get beyond that reality, the more distractions there are, and it's harder to figure out how to manage that workforce. So yeah, I definitely think we're coming back at some point. There'll always be roles that can be remote, will be remote, but I do think it will be more like 80% of the people coming back 3 days a week, not like vice versa.
Yeah, so it's funny that you ended there. And thanks for sharing that. I was going to ask just to confirm if across the panel, you will all have at least some full-time remote teammates. It sounds like yes, some. Thad, maybe, I don't know if that was true for you.
Yeah, it's probably, I'd say probably got about, 70 to 60% are full-time remote, believe it or not. So.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Actually more.
And by the way, full-time remote, it's not as though they're banned from the office, right? I think we'd all say, hey, if we're having, whatever it is, a huge kickoff for a project or maybe a quarterly gathering for a big team or what have you. It's interesting for us. We've, of course, gone through a lot of the same things. And another one of the dimensions is that it's opened up the talent pool. The number of people we could bring onto our team that were excited to come to our really cool office right in downtown Denver for 40 plus hours a week is great. And there's a big world out there. And as you start to grow fast, it's nice to be able to use some of that flexibility to bring teammates into an organization that maybe otherwise you never would have benefited from their insights, their experience, simply because of that sort of geographic barrier. So super interesting. Exploring that maybe a little bit further. Scott, you were mentioning that people were working really hard during the pandemic. No doubt about it. And Thad, earlier you were talking about launching mental health and wellness benefits. Curious how you all as leaders have gone about caring for your teams and understanding that burnout is real, and especially not only when you're in intense time periods at work. That's part of being in the startup and growth company world, right? If that's not what you're ready for, this may not be the line of work for you. But when those time periods go from being a couple of months of a huge push to ship a big product or get a deal done to over a year, And when those things are compounded by other stresses in life related to all these things in this context, it can really pile up. I'm curious to hear, from some of you how you've managed that, both as a leader, perhaps as a team, operationally. Stumper. All right, I'll go ahead. I just wanted to quickly to touch on that to see if there were any insights there. But actually, let me tie back quickly to maybe to more you as a leader. I think part of what our audience wants to understand is your story here. And so several times in that last go round, I heard the word trust. And I think that is, of course, a key foundational underpinning to leadership. And I'm really curious to hear about each of your, call it personal, professional development arc, right? We're all on some sort of journey. We're all changing and learning, hopefully in positive ways, and growing every day. And, the last 18 months, at least in my experience, the time periods of the greatest challenge also correlate pretty closely to the time periods of the most growth and development for people, for organizations, what have you. Really curious to hear how you've grown or some of the things that you think might be lasting changes on you personally, professionally as a leader. Paige, maybe we'll go back to our tradition.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was coming back since none of us answered that question. So I think for me, and it kind of does tie back to your question, Brian, about mental health. And one of the things that I pride myself on, I think, as a leader is transparency and vulnerability, right? So just being real about not only who I am, but what I'm going through, and trying to bring out the transparency and truth and vulnerability in leadership is actually a really good thing. So my story is that I moved to Denver, Colorado when my wife was pregnant with our twins, and I didn't know a single person. And I thought that was a wildly good time to start a business. And I was quickly reminded about, what makes leaders good in those times of sort of challenge and no idea what was going to happen. And it was truth and vulnerability and trust in that, if you continue to find great people and bring great people around you, that it will work out in a good way. And I think I was reminded of that in, March of 2020, when this hit us in the face of go back to, truth and vulnerability. And so from a mental standpoint, I would tell my team, hey, I'm not doing great right now, right? I'm trying to manage, my twins at home at 2.5 at the time. And I'm trying to figure out, all of our team members. And we too made a decision not to lay anyone off or not to change comp. Our COO, CFO, and I had many late conversations, and we were real with each other. Hey, we don't know what this looks like. We're going to have to lean on each other, and each of us are going to have to step up at different times because we might not all be in a good place all the time. And so I think really talking to our team about that and living through it myself, and myself getting help and myself working with coaches along the way, I think encouraged my team to do the same thing.
Thanks, Paige. And yeah, by the way, I'd love to hear, and thanks for including that piece at the end as well, is sort of where, we're all on these journeys. Where do you also go for that help, right? Because, my earlier question was, how do we help our teams? Like, we also have to help ourselves. I think that's a really interesting dimension of this as well. Ian or Scott?
I can go.
Great.
I was pretty fortunate where I had, for the first time, hired an executive coach a few months before the pandemic started. And so that was pretty fortunate because, as a CEO, founder, I was a cog in a wheel at a big enterprise before, right? I was a leader of one when this company started. And you sort of forget how your role changes and the perception of you changes as people become more and more distant from you, right? You got your first 5 people, you're all in the room, you're all hustling, it's all flat, you've got a better title, but you're really all hustling and doing the exact same thing. And maybe you have the winning vote on a tie, maybe, right? And then as you start to get to a bigger firm, I don't know, you're scary and people's perception of you are different. And so like, how to be, relatable, how to make sure, you are vulnerable, you own up to your issues, and you just become more humanized to the organization was something I learned pretty early on, and it's obviously escalated by a pandemic where you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll tell you everything as it happens. And that was I was happy. I had some of those insights about safety, vulnerability, and some of these terms that I didn't really know about, to be honest with you, until I had a coach. It's like, this is what leadership looks like. This is how leading leaders looks like. And it was pretty fortunate to be working with an executive coach at that point in time. So I would highly recommend it to anybody else out there. As you get to 10, 20 people, it's never too early to start thinking about it, because your role changes from 10 to 50 to 100 to however many people you've got now, 1,000 people now, Brian. It changes like at every step in time. So it was helpful.
Sure does. And I'm really glad thank you for sharing that. And, important note. And again, we're sending our friends at Denver Startup Week up here. This is a whole session of panels for next year. But the notion of leadership, the elements of it that can be learned, which is quite a bit in my opinion. Some of it does need to come from who you are, but a lot of it are things that can be learned. It's a really interesting point. Ian, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think first and foremost, right, this is a huge question and one that I've got enormous curiosity and excitement about, but also one that, I don't even think, a half a day or 2 days straight would even, suffice. So the idea of fitting in, but I think a couple of things jump to mind for me that's spring true. One is sort of just like an unrelenting curiosity of just like exploring, trying, testing, iterating, getting better. And then also I sort of think about coachability. I know for myself, as an athlete, at 10 years old, right? And having had that my whole life, having been to all sorts of personal therapy, marriage therapy, executive coaching, like you name it, and there's an openness to it. And I think that's huge. And I think the last thing that I would say that's been a wonderful summary of so many things is a single book out there that's the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but I've never found a guide that was so helpful that, has taken decades of work and exploration and sort of put it in one place.
First of all, thank you for the recommendation too. I'm jotting that down. Maybe we'll get through the link in the chat here. So I can stop writing and start moderating again. But thank you for sharing that, Ian. Thad, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, first off, was very fortunate to be part of BEN. So Kay and Alicia and Kelly, thank you so much. We organized what we called the BEN Den, which was essentially kind of like a CEO's anonymous support group. It was a group of CEOs that Dan King, former CEO of Ready Talk, and I, led here in Denver. And it was really kind of a group of series that Paige joined us, Scott was part of it, where we would really kind of talk about some of the issues that we'd be going through. The other thing is just kind of a little bit on the dig deeper type of analogy is I started kind of a couple of walk and talk series. And I know, Brian, you and I have gone on a couple of those where, we'll walk around Wash Park and really go into some of the challenges and issues. And I kind of felt like that support mechanism was probably the most helpful because we were all kind of going through these issues together, but we'd seen them differently, right? From, size and scale to the problems that we would have. And being able to kind of bounce those ideas off of one another really allowed for me to understand some of the challenges that I had. And more importantly, went from there. And finally, I think one of the biggest pieces, it's a real big vulnerability, is really starting to survey your team and really getting some honest feedback on, what are we doing right, but where are we completely off base and where do we really need to grow? And then putting a focus around how we're going to grow. Sometimes we can, make those changes to the ship and be able to reorient. Sometimes, we can't, and we have to be very open and honest on those changes that we can't make. So for me, it really meant, an opportunity to kind of reinforce my support network, work with others and being able to help. And then, finally, I think, through all of this, I've always told my team that, the availability of me is I'm there. So, if I can ever jump on the phone or spend time with anybody, that is something that I will gladly and happily do and never turn anybody down when they ask for time. So those are kind of some of the ways that we kind of coped through and managed, this process. But, to Ian's point, I could spend, months talking about this topic in particular.
No question. And really interesting. Thank you all for sharing, for sharing and for sharing your vulnerability. And just to chime in there, as someone who's been through the ups and downs as much as anybody, I think what we can all say is like everyone in our audience is full of people who are either aspiring entrepreneurs or at least considering it, or maybe early in their journey. There will be dark days. There will be things that hit you hard, and unquestionably the last 18 months have probably delivered some of the darker ones. And being prepared for that and knowing, I mean, this is the essence of resilience, is taking some agency in that, right? And knowing, here's what I'm going to do when I hit that day. And one of the things I just heard from a different framing from everybody is having some support. I mean, it is true that leadership, the role of being a founder, a co-founder, and CEO can be isolating. And I just would encourage everybody to explore lots of different ways that you can get help from people who have been there and done that, from your peers, from your local community. It's one of the things that I have found to be an incredible accelerator of my development personally, professionally. Thad mentioned Ben, so maybe a good tie off here too. One of the groups that's been incredible locally at helping to connect me with people who have seen what it is that you're going through right now. For me, I remember when back to Scott's point on the travel business, right? When our cancellation rate soared to over 95%, which is the same as revenue cancellation soaring to over 95%. Being able to get quickly on the phone with C-level people from larger companies than us who had dealt with negative revenue growth cycles was crucial to helping me to navigate that. So quick plug for both Ben and just seeking out some peers, because that's critical as you go about these things. Hi, Kay.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much. It was awesome. So we have a couple of questions, and thanks to all of you. There's so much that I learned, and I think really kind of on that thread, and on Brian, where you were just going, especially for some of the earlier entrepreneurs that are in our audience today, and or the folks that are really kind of thinking about, should I do this, right? Like, should I take this leap? I'd love to hear from each of you, what was your best piece of advice that you received, or what is the piece of advice that you would give, to yourself, Paige, as you moved to Colorado only 4 years ago, right? Or Scott and Thad, you guys who started almost 10 years ago, right? I mean, think about kind of some of those earlier dark days and the earlier decision days. So Brian, why don't you start us off this time?
Oh, I like this. You've taken on my role. I can just be a panelist now. This is much
yes, you can.
I think the best piece of advice that I received, and it was something that I heard from a few people, and also a bit of just piecing together. I think one of the things I like to do is try and I don't ever wholesale adopt anyone else's framework. It's more find something in there that I can add to the frame I'm building over time. Is that you have to decide early on what the one thing, or maybe two or three, but it's better if it's one, that you just passionately believe. And often it's the thing that no one else believes, right? And it's like, this is the thing that is going to define this company. And frankly, it's just the hill I'm willing to die on, right? Because you're going to get a lot of people telling you you're wrong. And you're going to get a lot of people telling you you're crazy and your business idea sucks and the market's not big enough and blah, 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 right? And it's like, and some of them are right. And there's some things, and you have to shape and learn and iterate over time, but there's got to be some essence to what it is that you're doing, that you believe in with such conviction that you're willing to listen to 50 really smart people tell you you're wrong and come out of those meetings saying, no, I'm right. And that's the vision we're going to pursue.
Great. Thank you. Ian, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know if my computer's on the fritz. Can you guys still hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
We're a little
Cool.
fuzzy, but otherwise.
I think for me, it's pretty simple. And it's this idea of trust yourself, and maybe it's a tangent or parallel to what you just said there, Brian, right? But I think that there were places where things seemed logical, And it seemed like you could figure them out. And yet there was this real fear of not having expertise, right? Of not having the educational background or the experience or not having done it before. And, you go searching for confirmation and maybe even hire an expert to the tune of, many thousands of dollars and not get something any better than what you could have done yourself. And I think obviously the balance there is, we've got to be open-minded and look for input as well, but, trust yourself.
Great. Thank you. Paige?
Yeah, I mean, go for it. I think that's my biggest piece is go for it and know that you're going to get punched in the face, and it's not a matter of getting punched in the face. It's about getting back up. So I think that's the big one for me. And one thing that I want to go back with Brian about getting support and help. I think you're never going to get what you don't ask for. So ask for help, ask for support, and I think what you're going to find and what I found is that people really do genuinely want to help. Especially if they've been in your shoes, they want to help. Like, hey, if I can help you avoid one landmine that I stepped on that was really nasty, like that's in everybody's best interest. So you're never going to get what you don't ask for, and go for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige. Scott?
I'll echo some of what Brian was saying. I think one, stay focused. So there's something like, what do we stand for, right? What is people doing? But as you get bigger, sort of these opportunities to go chase the shiny object, as they call it, becomes more compelling over time, right? You get in this like growth. We got to diversify. We got to go chase these million opportunities. And so you always have to sort of fight that instinct, right? And sort of stay focused on what it is. Because if you're solving one person's problem perfectly, there's a lot of that person out there, right? So just defining your market, make sure you're solving it really well for a single person, and staying focused, I think is one of the things that I've tried to like hammer into my head every week, every year. It's like, stay focused. And I think it's served us well, as there's a lot of opportunities out there to chase. I would also just say, like, I think right now is like the most amazing time to start a business. Pandemic has just changed how people are living and working and learning and moving. And, it's like 10 years of change in one. And I think in that change just creates a lot of interesting opportunity. We see it in our business and travel, but it's happening all over the place. So I think, just trying to figure out where the puck's going, where is it, what's going to be sticky, what sort of habits have changed that probably aren't going to go back, and how to lean into that. Because, I sort of wish I could start over now and sort of have a new thesis, and, it's easier to put some stuff on paper and start than it is to sort of scale. So I'm sort of envious of the people that are early stage these days.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. Pat?
Yeah, well, so the cool thing about being last is I can just summarize what everybody said and make it sound really cool. So definitely would agree with the trust aspect. Definitely would agree with the go for it. But I think, the biggest lesson for me is value the people that you have, and really understand, that you're making a difference together. And hopefully you're creating value in that process. And so, for us, it's always being able to recognize and really be able to reaffirm, but continue that, our convictions are going to lead us to that journey, and that we're going to get through it. And so I think, for us is just making sure that we continue the value relationship with one another, and continue to deliver against that.
Awesome. Yeah, so really just kind of the last question here, which is, I think, on that thread is, all of you talked a little bit about the mental health of your teams, as well as a little bit about your own mental health, right? And I think it's incredibly important, especially as you talk about kind of living on the life on the razor's edge. And to Scott's point, the amazing opportunity that now sits in front of us. So just quickly, if you could just summarize one word, one sentence, how do you individually, right, which the line is very thin between you individually and you as the founder, CEO of your companies, but how do you find your peace, your comfort, your self-confidence, whatever it is, on that razor's edge? Scott, you want to go first?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy for me. I mean, I felt super fortunate to have a family and kids, and my life didn't change all that much, to be honest with you. I worked and I went home, played with my kids, did dinner, went to sleep, and I did that for 18 months. I just didn't see anybody else for a while, but it didn't really feel all that difference besides the business travel. So that's the anchor, right? And that just sort of keeps you grounded. And so I felt fortunate, right? I've got a lot of single friends that were living in Manhattan and, 200 square feet, and their pandemic experience is way different than mine. So I felt fortunate to be in that sort of stage of life during this thing, and that definitely grounded me through the event.
Great. Dad?
For me, it really is all about being able to take a break and take the mind. And I do that on the bike. And usually I'm doing it with Skratch Labs, although they discontinued the miso ginger and the Parmesan red pepper bars. So that's kind of ended my zen, but hopefully maybe somebody can fix that problem. But I like to get out of the office and the environment and to take advantage of that opportunity to really take my problems on the bicycle.
Awesome. Ian, I think that's a setup for you.
Yeah, bad screwed. Sorry, man. I think a couple things. One, I've learned about myself where I'm best, and I'm best in sprints, and best in taking a break and a step back. In terms of the day to day, I am so bad at it, which maybe is part of why it's fun. But during this time in particular, I started doing yoga and like just the classic, online via YouTube. And I'm bad, but it is fun, and it's really it really grounds me, I guess, is what I would say, as much as that feels cliche to say out loud.
Awesome. Paige?
Yeah, mine's also exercise. And then letting go of the guilt of wanting to be out of the office or wanting to be away from the computer. I made a commitment that I was going to play golf every other week. And I did that. And for a while I felt guilty. And now I'm like, no, this makes me a way better CEO when I do take this time. So I'm not going to be able to play golf for that much longer. So now I'll pick up my snowboard. So those are the things that I like to do. And I think letting go of the guilt of that is important.
Awesome. Brian, last comments to you.
Same answer. I mean, for self-care, it's all about exercise. I think it's critical for me, at least. But then back to Scott's point, in many ways, having my wife, Erin, and our twin boys, especially the boys who are teenagers and like in good times and bad, they really just don't care about what I do all day. And I'm not, the co-founder and CEO. I'm just dad. And it's great. On the tough days, they're still the same, and that picks me up. And on the best days, they are teenagers who are ready to critique their father's every move, and that keeps me nice and humble, which I'm grateful for.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been so much fun, and I learned so much, and I appreciate all of you. And obviously, we are thrilled that each and every one of you are part of the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network, affectionately known as Ben Colorado. And Brian, thank you so much for moderating. You guys have a great day. Thank you, DSW. See you all soon.
Everybody. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks.